My first question asks me to graph the equation y is equal to 6x. Now, this equation is in slope-intercept form, but it does seem to be missing something, and that can throw students off. So it's very important to know what this is missing and how I go about accounting for that. So in this case, when I have y is equal to 6x, what I need to do is I need to remember that there is a value that I don't write that goes in that particular location, and that value is going to be my y-intercept. The coefficient of x, or m value in my equation, is the slope. The b value, or constant, that's the y-intercept. Notice I have the slope. The slope is 6. It's the number directly in front of the x. What I don't have right now is the y-intercept. How can I go about remedying that? Well, in this particular case, I need to remember that the y-intercept is actually a 0. And what is actually happening is that I have a plus 0 on this equation. But in math, I don't want to write extra information that does not necessarily affect the equation. So I wouldn't normally write this, but I can graph it right there on my graph. At the origin, 0, 0. Now, I need to use my slope, which is a 6. And I can think of this as actually being either a 6 over a 1 or a negative 6 over a negative 1. Either one of these will equal 6 for me. And then I can graph my next point by starting at that y-intercept and then rising in the up or down direction and running in the left to right direction. In this case, let's go ahead and we will use the positive numbers here. We'll use 6 and 1. I rise 6. I move over 1. Or run 1. There's my other point. At this point, I could draw a line to finish this. That's not the most beautiful line in the world. Let's go ahead and switch over to the edge elastic, which is where the test will be, which is where this review is located, and let's see how we'd use that tool. I would click on the line AB feature, and the first thing I would do is click on the origin, 0, 0. Notice that gives me point A. Point B, I can then click on, and I can move that around to wherever I would like. In this case, I'm going to rise 6, run 1, set my point, and now my graph is done. I have graphed that equation. Let's move on to equation 2. We're going to switch back over to OneNote so that we can solve this. Now notice this is a little different. This equation is not already in slope-intercept form. I have to move this equation into slope-intercept form. I do what's called solving for y. So I'm going to write this out. 7x minus y is equal to negative 5. This skill, solving for y, is the most important skill for this entire test. If you can't do this, you probably won't pass the test. If you can do this, you probably will pass the test. It's that vital. I start by moving the x term. Since the x term is positive, I subtract it, minus 7x to both sides. When I bring down my y, it's important that I remember I'm bringing down a negative y. Then I write minus 5 minus 7x. I'm not done yet. I have to remove the negative from my y. Right there. That can't be there. What that actually is a negative 1. So I'm going to divide it by a negative 1. But if I divide that by a negative 1, I have to divide each term by a negative 1. The results are y is equal to 5 plus negative 7 divided by a negative 1 is a positive 7. So y is equal to 5 plus 7x. 5 in this case is my y-intercept. That's the constant or number that's by itself. It's also known as a b value. And the 7 is the coefficient of x. It's my slope or my m value. I'm going to graph my y-intercept first. Then I will use my slope to determine where my second point is. My y-intercept is at 5. And now I need to remember that for my slope, that could either be a positive 7 over a positive 1, or it could be a negative 7 over a negative 1. Both of those, when I divide them out, end up being a positive 7. In this case, I want to use the second version, negative 7 and negative 1. So I'm going to run down 7 and left 1. I will then plot that point at negative 1 comma negative 2. And I'm going to draw a really ugly line. Yeah, that's not nice at all. Let's see if we can let our edge elastic make a better looking line for us. We're going to switch over. When we do, I need to start by graphing my y-intercept. I click line AB, have to check real quick to make sure of what my equation was, and then switch back over. When I do, I will select my y-intercept at 5. That's point A. Then I'll click and drag point B. Notice I can drag it around anywhere that I'd like. In this case, I go down 7, left 1, both in the negative direction, and that's my line. At that point, I have successfully graphed this equation. Notice I can hit the various buttons. I can undo an action. If I accidentally undo an action, I can redo it, or I could reset all.